The blizzard hit without mercy the moment Victoria Zimmerman's horse stumbled into a hidden ravine, throwing her hard against frozen ground that knocked every thought from her mind except one final prayer before darkness swallowed everything whole. Nathan Morrison had been checking his trap lines in the mountains above Wheatland, Wyoming, when the storm rolled in with a vengeance that February afternoon in 1882. He knew these peaks better than most men knew their own barns, having spent the better part of 5 years working cattle in summer and trapping in winter across this unforgiving landscape. The wind screamed through the pines with such force it seemed the trees themselves might snap, and the snow fell so thick he could barely see his own gloved hands. Most sensible folks had already hunkered down hours ago, but Nathan had one more line to check before he could justify turning back toward his small cabin. That was when he saw the dark shape half buried in the snow drift. At first, he thought it might be a fallen elk or perhaps a bear that had wandered from its den. But as he urged his buckskin gelding closer, fighting against wind that threatened to push them both sideways, Nathan's heart seized in his chest. It was a woman, lying face down in the snow, her dark hair spread around her head like spilled ink. A horse stood nearby, favoring its front leg, reins dangling. Nathan was off his mount before conscious thought caught up with instinct. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands already working to turn her over gently. Her face was pale as the snow itself, lips tinged blue, but when he pressed his fingers to her throat, he felt the faint flutter of a pulse. She was alive, but barely. "No, no, no," he muttered, already shrugging out of his heavy coat to wrap around her. She was dressed for riding but not for a mountain blizzard. Her own coat was quality wool, but it had gotten soaked through, which meant hypothermia was already setting in deep. "Come on, stay with me." He lifted her into his arms, alarmed at how cold she felt even through his gloves. She was a small woman, probably no more than 22 or 23 years old, with delicate features now slack with unconsciousness. Nathan whistled for his horse and somehow managed to get mounted while holding her against his chest. Her horse would have to fend for itself or follow. He could not waste time trying to pony a lame animal in this storm. The ride back to his cabin took nearly 40 minutes that felt like hours. Nathan kept adjusting his hold, keeping her face pressed against his neck, trying to share whatever body heat he could spare. The wind howled like demons, and the temperature was dropping fast as evening approached. If he had been even 30 minutes later on his rounds, she would have been dead. His cabin appeared through the white curtain of snow like salvation itself. It was small, just 2 rooms, but it was solid and tight, with a good stone fireplace he had built himself. Nathan kicked the door open and carried the woman straight to the hearth. The fire had burned down to embers, but he built it back up with practiced efficiency, throwing on kindling and logs until flames roared back to life. Then he turned his attention to the woman who might die in his home if he did not work fast. Her clothes were soaked through. Nathan knew enough about cold to understand that wet fabric would kill her as surely as leaving her in the snow. His hands shook slightly as he began removing her coat, then her riding jacket. He tried to be respectful, but urgency overrode propriety. He stripped her down to her chemise and drawers, then wrapped her in every dry blanket and fur he owned, placing her as close to the fire as he dared. But she was still too cold. Her breathing was shallow, her lips still blue. Nathan had seen men die from exposure before, had watched the life drain from their eyes when the cold got too deep into their bones. This woman needed heat, needed it desperately, and blankets alone were not going to be enough. He made his decision in seconds. Nathan stripped off his own wet outer layers until he was down to his undershirt and trousers, then climbed under the blankets with her, pulling her cold body against his chest. The shock of her icy skin made him gasp, but he wrapped his arms around her and held tight, willing his warmth into her. "Stay awake," he said, even though her eyes remained closed. "Talk to me. Tell me your name. Tell me where you are from. Just stay awake. There was no response. Nathan rubbed her arms, her back, trying to generate friction and heat. He pulled her legs between his, sharing warmth with every inch of contact he could manage. Her hair was still damp, so he reached out and dragged his spare shirt closer, using it to dry the long strands as best he could. Come on, he urged. You did not survive that storm just to give up now. Stay with me. Stay awake. Talk to me. Minutes crawled past. Nathan kept up a steady stream of words, sometimes coherent, sometimes just sounds meant to pull her back toward consciousness. He told her about his cabin, about the mountains, about his horse. He told her about growing up in Texas, about coming north after his parents died. He told her things he had not spoken aloud in years, just to fill the silence with something other than the wind howling outside. And slowly, incrementally, he felt her body begin to warm. The deathly chill started to recede. Her breathing deepened slightly, became more regular. Nathan kept rubbing her arms, her hands, bringing circulation back to frozen extremities. It was nearly 2 hours later when she finally stirred. Nathan felt it immediately, the small twitch of her fingers against his chest, the flutter of her eyelashes against his neck. That is it, he said urgently. Come back. Open your eyes. Stay awake. Talk to me. She made a small sound, something between a moan and a whimper. Her body shuddered, and Nathan held her tighter, knowing that the warming process could be painful as sensation returned. I know it hurts, he said softly, but you are alive. You are safe. Just open your eyes for me. This time she managed it. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes that were a startling shade of green even in the firelight. She stared at him without comprehension for several seconds, her gaze unfocused. Where? Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse and confused. You are in my cabin, Nathan said. I found you in the snow. You are safe now, but you need to stay awake. Talk to me. What is your name? She blinked slowly, as if trying to process his words. Victoria, she finally managed. Victoria Zimmerman. Victoria, he repeated, and something about saying her name aloud felt significant. I am Nathan Morrison. You were caught in the blizzard. Do you remember what happened? Her brow furrowed. My horse. Something scared him. He bolted. I tried to hold on, but... She shuddered again, and this time it was clearly from more than just cold. Where is he? Is he all right? He was favoring a leg, but he was standing when I found you. I had to leave him. I am sorry, but you were dying. I had to get you inside. Tears gathered in her eyes. He is my father's horse. Papa will be so angry. Nathan felt a twist in his chest at the distress in her voice. We will look for him when the storm clears. Right now, you need to focus on getting warm. Stay awake, talk to me. Tell me where you are from. What were you doing out in the mountains? She was quiet for a moment, and Nathan could see her fighting to keep her eyes open. He rubbed her arm more vigorously. Victoria. Stay awake. Talk to me. Wheatland, she said, the words slightly slurred. I live in Wheatland. I was trying to get to my uncle's ranch. He has property north of town. Papa said the weather would hold, but... She trailed off, her eyes starting to drift closed again. Victoria. Nathan's voice was sharp now. Look at me. Keep your eyes open. Tell me more. Why were you going to your uncle's ranch alone? Her eyes opened again, focusing on his face with what seemed like great effort. Not supposed to be alone. My father's foreman was meant to accompany me, but he took ill yesterday. Papa said to wait, but I thought. She swallowed hard. I thought I knew the way well enough. I have ridden it a dozen times. But the storm came so fast. Mountain weather is unpredictable, Nathan said. keeping his voice calm and even. "But you survived. You are here and you are warming up. Can you feel your fingers and toes?" She made a small movement as if testing and then winced. "They hurt." "That is good," Nathan assured her. "Pain means feeling is coming back. It means no frostbite, or at least not serious. You are going to be fine, Victoria, but you have to stay awake. Keep talking. Tell me about your family." And so she did, in halting words and long pauses where Nathan had to keep prompting her. She told him about her father, Richard Zimmerman, who owned one of the larger mercantile stores in Wheatland and had invested in property throughout the territory. She told him about her mother, who had died 3 years prior from pneumonia, leaving Victoria to manage her father's household. She told him about her uncle, her mother's brother, who ran cattle on a ranch 20 miles north and was expecting her for a week-long visit. As she talked, Nathan kept checking her condition. Her color was improving, the blue tinge fading from her lips. Her skin was warming, no longer that deathly cold. But he did not dare let her sleep yet, not when she had been so close to freezing to death. "What about you?" Victoria asked suddenly, her voice a bit stronger now. "Why do you live alone in the mountains?" Nathan was surprised by the question. She was more alert than he had realized. "I run cattle in the low country during summer," he explained. "In winter I trap beaver, fox, whatever the mountains offer. It is a solitary life, but it suits me." "No family?" "Not anymore. My parents died of typhoid when I was 19. I worked cattle drives in Texas for a few years, then drifted north. Ended up here about 5 years ago and decided to stay." "That sounds lonely," Victoria said softly. Nathan considered this. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But the mountains have their own company, and I go into Wheatland for supplies every few weeks. I am not a complete hermit." She was quiet for a moment, and Nathan felt her shiver again, though it was less violent than before. He adjusted the blankets around them, making sure she was still completely covered except for her face. "I should probably be scandalized," Victoria said suddenly, and there was a hint of wry humor in her voice. "Lying here in a stranger's arms, in my underclothes." Nathan felt heat rise in his face. "I apologize for the impropriety, but your clothes were soaked through. You would have died if I had not gotten you warm." "I know," she said quickly. "I am not criticizing. I am grateful. You saved my life, Nathan Morrison. I am just observing that if anyone in Wheatland knew about this, my reputation would be thoroughly ruined. Then we will make sure no one finds out the details," Nathan said firmly. "As far as anyone needs to know, I found you, brought you here, kept you by the fire. The rest is no one's business." Victoria tilted her head back slightly to look up at his face. They were closer than Nathan had fully registered, close enough that he could see flecks of gold in her green eyes, could count the freckles across her nose. She was beautiful, he realized with a start. Not in a delicate porcelain way, but in a vibrant, alive way that made something in his chest tighten. "You are a good man," she said softly. "I am just a man who happened to be in the right place." Nathan deflected, uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done the same." "I am not so sure about that." Victoria's eyes were starting to droop again despite her best efforts. "Stay awake a bit longer," Nathan urged. "Just a bit more. Tell me about Wheatland. I do not get into town often enough to know much about it beyond the trading post and the saloon." So Victoria talked about the town, about the people she knew, about the small dramas and joys of frontier life. She told him about the new church that had been built last year, about the teacher who had come from Boston and scandalized everyone by wearing trousers on weekdays. She told him about the summer dance that everyone attended, about the traveling shows that occasionally passed through. As she talked, Nathan found himself fascinated not just by what she said but by how she said it. There was intelligence in her observations, humor in her descriptions. She was clearly educated, well-read, but there was nothing pretentious about her. She spoke to him as an equal, not as a mountain man beneath her social station. The hours passed. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the cabin, warmth and safety held. Nathan kept the fire built up, kept Victoria talking when her eyes started to close, kept her wrapped against him because he could still feel the cold in her bones, slowly dissipating but not yet gone. It was well past midnight when he finally felt confident enough to let her sleep. Her body temperature had normalized, her breathing was steady and deep, her color had fully returned. She was exhausted, her words becoming increasingly slurred, her efforts to stay awake more and more labored. "You can sleep now," Nathan said gently. "You are safe. I will keep watch." "Thank you," Victoria murmured, her eyes already closing. "Thank you, Nathan." He listened as her breathing evened out into the rhythm of sleep, felt the way her body finally relaxed completely against his. Only then did Nathan allow himself to acknowledge how terrified he had been, how close she had come to dying. If he had been 30 minutes later, if the storm had been slightly worse, if he had not seen her in the snow. But he had. She was alive. And now he was lying in his bed with a woman he had just met, a woman who was already working her way under his skin in ways he did not quite understand. Nathan knew he should move, should put some respectable distance between them now that the immediate danger had passed. But she was still too cold, still needed the warmth, and he told himself that was the only reason he stayed exactly where he was, holding Victoria Zimmerman close as the storm raged on outside. When dawn finally came, gray and cold, the wind had died down to occasional gusts, but snow still fell steadily. Nathan woke from the light doze he had allowed himself to find Victoria still sleeping peacefully against him. In the morning light filtering through the cabin's small window, he could see her more clearly. Her hair was deep brown, almost black, with a slight curl to it. Her face was oval-shaped, with high cheekbones and a determined chin. There was a small scar above her right eyebrow, barely noticeable. She looked peaceful in sleep, younger than her years, vulnerable in a way that made Nathan feel fiercely protective. He carefully extracted himself from the blankets, moving slowly so as not to wake her. She stirred slightly but did not wake, burrowing deeper into the warm spot he had left. Nathan dressed quickly in the cold air, then built up the fire again before heading outside to check on his horse and look for any sign of Victoria's mount. The world was white and silent, the kind of silence that only comes after a heavy snow. Drifts had piled up against the cabin walls, and everything familiar was transformed into strange shapes and mounds. Nathan's buckskin was in the small lean-to stable he had built, looking annoyed but unharmed. Nathan fed and watered him, then set out to look for Victoria's horse. He found the animal about a quarter-mile from the cabin, standing under a thick stand of pines where the snow had not accumulated as deeply. The horse was cold and miserable but alive. His front leg was swollen, probably a strained tendon, but not broken. Nathan took his time approaching, speaking softly, until he could grab the dangling reins. He led the horse back to the cabin, settling him in the stable with his own mount. The injured leg would need rest and cold compresses, but the horse would recover. When Nathan came back inside, stamping snow from his boots, he found Victoria awake and sitting up, the blankets clutched around her shoulders. Her hair was tousled, her eyes wide as she took in her surroundings in full daylight. "Good morning," Nathan said, keeping his voice neutral. "Your horse is safe. He has a strained tendon but nothing that will not heal with rest." Relief washed over Victoria's face. "Thank you. Thank you so much." She looked down at herself, at the blankets, and color rose in her cheeks. "My clothes are hanging by the fire," They were soaked through. I had to. Nathan cleared his throat. I had to remove them. I apologize. You have nothing to apologize for, Victoria said firmly. You saved my life. Are they dry? Nathan checked the clothes he had hung from pegs near the fireplace. Mostly. They might be a bit damp still, but they are wearable. He turned his back to give her privacy while she dressed. He heard the rustle of fabric, small sounds of movement, and then her voice. You can turn around now. She was dressed in her riding skirt and blouse, both wrinkled and still slightly damp, but proper enough. Her hair hung loose down her back. She looked uncomfortable, uncertain in a way she had not been last night when pain and survival had taken precedence over propriety. I will make breakfast, Nathan said, giving her something else to focus on. Are you hungry? Starving, Victoria admitted. Nathan set about making coffee and frying up salt pork with beans. Simple fare but hot and filling. They ate in a silence that was not quite comfortable, both of them acutely aware of the intimacy they had shared the night before and the awkwardness of mourning. When they finished, Victoria helped him clean up, moving around the small cabin with efficiency. The storm has let up some, Nathan said, looking out the window. But it is still snowing, and there will be drifts for days. The trail to Wheatland is probably impassable right now. Victoria's face fell. My father will be worried sick. He will have expected me to arrive at my uncle's ranch yesterday. When I did not arrive, he will assume the worst. He would be right to assume the worst, Nathan pointed out. You nearly froze to death. Another hour or two, and no one would have found you until spring thaw. She flinched at his blunt words. I know. I made a stupid decision. Papa told me to wait, and I should have listened. She wrapped her arms around herself. I just wanted to get away for a while. The house feels so empty since Mama died, and Papa works all the time. My uncle writes such wonderful letters about the ranch, about the mountains and the cattle. I just wanted to be somewhere that felt alive again. Nathan understood that kind of loneliness, the kind that came not from being alone but from being surrounded by ghosts. Your father will forgive you, he said. Parents usually do, especially when the alternative is losing their child. Will we be able to travel today? Nathan shook his head. Not safely. The drifts are too deep, and your horse needs to rest that leg. We will have to wait at least another day, maybe two. I am sorry. Victoria sighed but nodded. I understand. I suppose I have no choice but to impose on your hospitality a bit longer. It is no imposition, Nathan said, and was surprised to find he meant it. Though I should warn you, I am not much of a host. The cabin is small, the accommodations are simple, and I am better with horses than people. A small smile tugged at Victoria's lips. You did all right last night. You kept me alive and awake when I wanted nothing more than to sleep. I would say you are better with people than you think. The day passed slowly. The storm continued, sometimes lessening to light flurries, sometimes picking back up to near whiteout conditions. Nathan went out periodically to check on the horses and bring in more firewood. Victoria tidied the cabin, clearly uncomfortable sitting idle. She found his small collection of books and was delighted to discover a worn copy of Shakespeare's sonnets. You read poetry? She asked, surprise evident in her voice. Nathan felt defensive. My mother taught school before she married. She made sure I could read. I meant no offense, Victoria said quickly. I just did not expect to find Shakespeare in a trapper's cabin. Most of the men I know would rather be caught dead than reading poetry. Then they are missing out, Nathan said. Words have power. Poetry understands that. Victoria looked at him with new interest, as if reassessing who he was. She settled into the single chair by the fire and began reading aloud, her voice melodic and expressive. Nathan found himself pausing in his work, just listening. She read sonnets about love and loss, about time and beauty, and something in the small cabin shifted, became more than just a shelter against the storm. When evening came, Nathan made dinner again, and they ate together with more ease than they had at breakfast. They talked about books, about places they had been, about dreams they had carried and dreams they had abandoned. Victoria told him about wanting to travel east, to see cities and museums, to experience things beyond the frontier. Nathan told her about his love for the mountains, how they made him feel simultaneously small and significant, part of something vast and eternal. "Do you ever get lonely up here?" Victoria asked. "Sometimes," Nathan admitted. "But it is a different kind of lonely than being surrounded by people who do not see you. Up here I can be myself. I do not have to pretend to be anything else." "I understand that," Victoria said softly. "In Wheatland, I am Richard Zimmerman's daughter. I am my mother's replacement in the household. I am a respectable young woman who should be thinking about marriage and babies. But sometimes I wonder who I would be if all those expectations fell away. Maybe you would be exactly who you are," Nathan suggested. "Maybe the expectations do not change us as much as we think they do." Victoria considered this, her green eyes thoughtful. "Maybe. Or maybe we never get the chance to find out." When it came time to sleep, they faced another awkward moment. The cabin had only one bed, and while Nathan had blankets enough to make a pallet on the floor, the cold was still bitter despite the fire. Victoria seemed to be thinking the same thing. "Last night," she said hesitantly, "we shared the bed out of necessity. I am warmer tonight, but it is still cold, and you should not have to sleep on the floor in your own home." "I am fine on the floor," Nathan said. "We are both adults," Victoria said, her chin coming up in that determined way he was beginning to recognize. "We can share sleeping space without impropriety. We already did last night. I trust you, Nathan Morrison." Those words, simple as they were, hit Nathan harder than they should have. He nodded. "All right. But I will stay above the blankets." They worked out an arrangement where Victoria slept under the blankets and Nathan lay on top with his coat over him. A clear physical boundary between them. But even with that separation, Nathan was intensely aware of her presence, of her breathing, of the small sounds she made as she settled into sleep. "Nathan!" Her voice came soft in the darkness. "Yes. Thank you. For everything. For saving me, for being kind. For treating me with respect. You are a good man." "Go to sleep, Victoria," Nathan said, his voice rougher than he intended. But he lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, wondering why this woman's presence affected him so much. He had been content in his solitude, had convinced himself he did not need anything more. But now, after just one day, the thought of his cabin without Victoria in it felt wrong, felt empty in a way it had never felt before. The next day dawned clearer, with actual sunshine breaking through the clouds. The snow had finally stopped, leaving the world transformed into a pristine wilderness of white. Nathan went out early to check the trails and found that while the drifts were deep, they were passable with care. Victoria's horse was still favoring his leg, but Nathan thought they could make it to Wheatland if they went slowly and walked more than they rode. He came back inside to find Victoria had made coffee and was attempting to fry eggs from his small store of provisions. She looked domestic and comfortable in his space, and Nathan felt his chest tighten at the sight. "We can travel today if you want," he said. "The going will be slow, but we should make Wheatland by evening." Something flickered across Victoria's face, an expression Nathan could not quite read. "Oh, that is good news." But she did not sound entirely convinced. They ate breakfast in near silence, both of them moving with a care that suggested they were handling something fragile. After they finished, Victoria went outside for a moment of privacy while Nathan saddled both horses. He was checking the cinch on his buckskin when Victoria returned, her cheeks pink from the cold. "Nathan," she said, "before we go, I want to say something." He turned to face her, his heart inexplicably beating faster. "All right. These 2 days they have been." She struggled for words. "They have been unexpected. I nearly died, and you saved me. But more than that, you treated me like a person, not just a woman who needed rescuing. You talked to me like an equal. You shared your home and your thoughts and—" She took a breath. "I do not want to go back to Wheatland and pretend this did not happen. I do not want to be strangers." Nathan felt something unfurl in his chest, something that had been locked tight for years. "I do not want that either," he admitted. "But Victoria, you live in town. You have a life there, responsibilities. I am a trapper who lives in the mountains. Our worlds do not exactly align." "Maybe they could," Victoria said, and there was hope in her voice, fragile and bright. "Maybe they could if we wanted them to." Before Nathan could respond, they heard the sound of horses approaching, many of them. They both turned to see a group of riders cresting the hill, and Victoria gasped. "That is my father." The lead rider was a tall man on a gray horse, his face set in grim lines. Behind him were at least 6 other men, all armed. They approached the cabin at a fast trot, and Nathan felt his stomach sink. This was about to get complicated. Richard Zimmerman dismounted before his horse had fully stopped. He was an imposing man in his late 40s, well-dressed even for a mountain search party, with steel gray hair and Victoria's green eyes. Those eyes swept over the cabin, over Nathan, and finally landed on his daughter with an expression of profound relief mixed with fury. "Victoria," he said, his voice tight. "Thank God. Are you hurt?" "I am fine, Papa," Victoria said, stepping forward. "I got caught in the storm, and Nathan Morrison found me. He saved my life." Zimmerman's gaze swung to Nathan, assessing and cold. "Is that so? And where exactly did he find you, daughter?" Victoria explained what had happened, how her horse had been spooked, how she had been thrown and knocked unconscious, how Nathan had found her half-frozen in the snow. She spoke clearly and firmly, but Nathan could see her father's expression growing darker with every word. "And you have been here alone with this man for 2 days?" Zimmerman asked. "He saved my life, Papa. I would be dead if not for him." "That may be true, but you have still spent 2 nights unchaperoned with a stranger." Zimmerman turned to Nathan. "Did you touch my daughter?" Nathan felt anger flare hot in his chest. "I saved her life. I kept her from freezing to death. I treated her with every respect. That was not what I asked." Victoria stepped between them. "Papa, stop. Nathan was a perfect gentleman. He gave me his bed, he kept me warm when I was dying of cold, he made sure I survived. You should be thanking him, not interrogating him like some criminal." "You do not understand the situation, Victoria," her father said sharply. "Your reputation." "My reputation?" Victoria's voice rose. "I nearly died, Papa. I nearly froze to death alone in the mountains. My reputation seems like a small concern compared to that." One of the other men, a grizzled older rider, cleared his throat. "Zimmerman, the girl is right. If this man saved her, we owe him thanks." But Zimmerman's jaw was set. "He will be thanked, compensated even. But Victoria, we need to get you home. Now." Nathan watched as Victoria's expression closed off, became the polite mask he imagined she wore in town. "Of course, Papa. Let me get my things." She went into the cabin and Nathan followed. Inside, she grabbed her coat and the few possessions she had with her. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Victoria," Nathan said quietly. She turned to him, and he saw tears gathering in her eyes. "I am sorry. My father is protective. He means well. I know, Nathan said, though he was not sure he believed it. Will you be all right? I will be fine. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. I meant what I said. I do not want us to be strangers. Will you come into Wheatland sometime? Will you let me see you again? Nathan wanted to say yes, wanted it more than he had wanted anything in years. But he had seen the way her father looked at him, had heard the disdain in the man's voice. I do not know if that is a good idea. Please, Victoria said, and the word held such longing that Nathan felt his resolve crumble. I will come to town, he promised. In a few weeks when I bring in my pelts. I will find you. Victoria smiled, sad but genuine. She reached out and squeezed his hand, a quick gesture that was over before it could be remarked upon. Thank you, Nathan, for everything. Then she was gone, walking out to where her father waited. Nathan watched from the doorway as Zimmerman helped her onto one of the spare horses, as the search party turned and began the journey back to Wheatland. Victoria looked back once, her eyes meeting Nathan's across the distance, and then they were gone, disappearing into the white landscape. Nathan stood in the doorway long after they had vanished, feeling the emptiness of his cabin in a way he never had before. The silence that had once been companionable now felt oppressive. The space that had been sufficient now felt hollow. He had been alone for 5 years and had told himself he preferred it that way. But 2 days with Victoria Zimmerman had shown him what he had been missing, had cracked open something in his chest that he was not sure how to close again. The weeks that followed were difficult. Nathan went about his normal routines, checking his traps, skinning and stretching pelts, maintaining his cabin and his horse. But his thoughts continually drifted to Victoria, to the sound of her laugh, to the way she read poetry, to the trust in her eyes when she had asked him to come to town. He found himself working harder than necessary, taking on extra tasks just to keep busy. He chopped enough firewood to last 2 winters, repaired parts of the cabin that did not really need repair, rode his trap lines more often than necessary. But nothing could fully distract him from the fact that his life, which had seemed full enough before, now felt lacking. It was nearly 4 weeks later when Nathan finally made the journey into Wheatland. He had a good collection of pelts to trade, enough to justify the trip, but he knew the real reason he was going. He needed to see Victoria again. Needed to know if what he had felt during those 2 days was real or just the intensity of the situation. Wheatland was a modest town by frontier standards, with a main street of wooden buildings and a few side streets branching off. There was a general store, a saloon, a church, a schoolhouse, and various other establishments that catered to the ranchers and townspeople. Nathan rode in around midday, drawing a few curious looks from locals who did not recognize him. He headed first to the trading post, where he spent an hour negotiating prices for his pelts with a shrewd trader who tried to lowball him at every turn. Nathan held firm, knowing the value of his goods, and eventually they settled on a fair price. With money in his pocket and his business concluded, Nathan allowed himself to consider the real reason for his trip. Finding Victoria proved easier than expected. As he was leaving the trading post, a woman called out to him. You are the one who saved Richard Zimmerman's daughter, are you not? Nathan turned to see a middle-aged woman with kind eyes looking at him with interest. I am. Nathan Morrison. I heard about what you did. That was good of you, bringing her back safe. She is a sweet girl, Victoria. The woman leaned in conspiratorially. If you are looking for her, she is usually at the mercantile this time of day. Her father's store, right there on the corner. Nathan thanked her and headed toward the store she had indicated. It was one of the larger buildings in town, with wide windows displaying various goods. He took a breath, suddenly nervous, and pushed open the door. The inside was well stocked and organized, with shelves of dry goods, tools, fabric, and all manner of provisions. A couple of customers browsed the merchandise, and behind the counter stood Victoria. She was wearing a deep blue dress, her hair pinned up in a style that was both practical and elegant. She was helping a customer, smiling and chatting as she wrapped purchases. Nathan hung back, just watching her. She looked different here, more polished, more formal. But then she laughed at something the customer said, and it was the same laugh he remembered, and his heart kicked in his chest. The customer left, and Victoria turned to greet the next patron. Her eyes landed on Nathan, and she froze. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the store. Then her face broke into a smile so bright it made something in Nathan's chest ache. "Nathan," she said, and his name on her lips sounded like coming home. "You came." "I said I would," Nathan replied, moving toward the counter. "I brought in my pelts. Thought I would see how you were doing." "I am well. I am so glad you are here." She glanced toward the back room. "My father is in his office. We should probably." But before she could finish, Richard Zimmerman emerged from the back, his expression hardening the moment he saw Nathan. "Morrison," he said, his tone neutral but not warm. "What brings you to town?" "Trading pelts," Nathan said evenly. "And I wanted to check on Victoria, make sure she recovered fully from her ordeal." "That is kind of you," Zimmerman said, in a way that suggested he thought it was anything but. "Victoria is perfectly fine, as you can see. We are grateful for what you did, of course. We paid the doctor to give her a thorough examination when she returned, and she was fortunate to escape without serious harm." Nathan caught the implication in those words, the suggestion that a doctor had verified Victoria's virtue. His jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "I am glad to hear it." An awkward silence fell. Victoria was looking between them, clearly distressed. "Papa, perhaps Nathan would like to stay for dinner? We could properly thank him for what he did." "I am sure Mr. Morrison has other business to attend to," Zimmerman said dismissively. "Actually," Nathan said, surprising himself, "I would be honored to accept your invitation, Miss Zimmerman." Victoria's face lit up, and Zimmerman looked trapped. Social convention demanded he extend hospitality to the man who had saved his daughter's life, even if he clearly did not want Nathan anywhere near his family. After a tense moment, he forced a smile. "Of course, we would be pleased to have you. Victoria, we close in 2 hours. You can bring Mr. Morrison home then." The 2 hours Nathan spent waiting were among the longest of his life. He wandered the town, making small purchases he did not really need, just killing time. But finally, the store closed, and Victoria met him on the street, now wearing a coat against the cold. "I am so glad you came," she said as they walked. "I have been thinking about you constantly." "I have been thinking about you too," Nathan admitted. "Your father does not seem pleased." Victoria sighed. "He is protective, and he worries about my reputation. But he will come around once he sees how good you are." Nathan was not so sure, but he did not say so. They walked through the quiet streets, Victoria pointing out various buildings and telling him stories about the town. Her home was a well-kept 2-story house on the edge of town, larger than most and speaking to her father's success. Dinner was an uncomfortable affair. Zimmerman maintained a polite but distant demeanor, asking Nathan questions that felt more like interrogation than conversation. Where was he from? What were his prospects? Did he plan to continue living as a trapper, or did he have ambitions toward something more stable? Nathan answered honestly, aware that he was being evaluated and found wanting. He was a trapper with modest means, no family connections, no prospects beyond what he could hunt and trade. In Zimmerman's eyes, he was clearly unsuitable for his daughter. But Victoria kept the conversation going, her warmth and enthusiasm bridging the awkward gaps. She told stories about the town, asked Nathan about the mountains, made sure he felt welcome even when her father did not. When dinner ended, Zimmerman excused himself to his office, leaving Nathan and Victoria alone in the parlor under the pretense of offering their guest coffee. "I am sorry about my father," Victoria said once they were alone. "He has been difficult since I returned. He watches me constantly, as if I might disappear again." "He nearly lost you," Nathan pointed out. "That would frighten any parent." "I know, but it is suffocating." She moved closer, her voice dropping. "I have not been able to stop thinking about those days in your cabin. The way we talked, the way you listened to me. I have never felt so seen by anyone." "Victoria," Nathan started, but she interrupted him. "I know what you are going to say, that our lives are different, that I am a town girl and you are a mountain man, that my father would never approve. But Nathan, I do not care about any of that. I care about how you make me feel. I care about the person I am when I am with you." Nathan wanted to pull her into his arms, wanted to tell her he felt the same. But they were in her father's house, and he could hear Zimmerman moving around upstairs. "We need to be careful," he said instead. "Your father already distrusts me. We cannot give him reason to forbid you from seeing me." "Then we will be careful," Victoria agreed. "But I need to see you again, Nathan. Please tell me you will come back to town." "I will come back," Nathan promised, "as often as I can." It was a promise that shaped the next several months of his life. Nathan made excuses to come into Wheatland far more often than necessary. He would bring in small batches of pelts, claiming he needed supplies, that he was considering buying land in the area, anything that justified his presence. And each time he would find ways to see Victoria. Sometimes they met at the store, conducting carefully proper conversations under her father's watchful eye. Other times they managed stolen moments in the church after services, or in the town square where Victoria often walked with friends. These meetings were never private enough, never long enough, but they were something. Slowly, carefully, they built a courtship under the most constrained circumstances. Nathan would slip Victoria notes when he could, short messages that she would tuck into her sleeve. She would write back, longer letters full of her thoughts and feelings, which she would pass to him through a trusted friend. They learned to communicate in glances, in small gestures that no one else would notice. And gradually, despite Zimmerman's clear disapproval, it became known in Wheatland that Nathan Morrison was courting Victoria Zimmerman. The town had mixed feelings about this. Some thought it romantic, the mountain man and the merchant's daughter. Others thought Victoria was throwing herself away on a man with no prospects. But most people liked Victoria and were inclined to wish her happy. The turning point came in late spring. Nathan had been working with a local rancher, helping move cattle to high country pastures for the summer. It was good work, and the rancher, impressed with Nathan's skills, offered him a permanent position. It was not a fortune, but it was steady pay, a step up from the uncertain income of trapping. Nathan accepted, and the next time he saw Victoria, he told her the news. Her face lit up with joy. "This is wonderful. It means you will be around more. Does it not?" "It does," Nathan confirmed. "And it gives me something to offer you, Victoria. Something real." She understood what he was saying, what he was asking without words. "You know my answer," she said softly. "You have known it since those days in your cabin." "I need to speak to your father," Nathan said. "Properly. Ask for permission to court you officially, with the intent of marriage." Victoria bit her lip. "He will not make it easy." "I do not expect easy," Nathan said. "But I am not giving up on you, on us." The conversation with Richard Zimmerman was exactly as difficult as Nathan had anticipated. He requested a private meeting at Zimmerman's store after hours, and the older man listened with a stone face as Nathan explained his intentions. "You want to marry my daughter," Zimmerman said flatly when Nathan finished. "Yes, sir. I know I am not what you envisioned for her. I do not have wealth or social position. But I love her. I will work hard to provide for her, to give her a good life. I will treat her with respect and devotion every day we have together." Zimmerman was quiet for a long moment. "You are right that you are not what I envisioned. I had hoped Victoria would marry someone established, someone who could give her the kind of life she deserves. A lawyer, perhaps, or a successful rancher. Someone with a future." "I have a future," Nathan said firmly. "It might not be the future you wanted for her, but it is real and honest. I have a job now, steady work with fair pay. I am buying land, starting to build something. It will not be grand, but it will be ours. And if she grows to resent the hardship, if she misses the comforts she has known, then we will work through it together. But I think you underestimate your daughter, Mr. Zimmerman. She is stronger than you give her credit for. She survived that blizzard, survived being lost and alone in the mountains. She has courage and determination. She knows her own mind." Zimmerman sighed, and for the first time, he looked less like an intimidating patriarch and more like a tired father. "I nearly lost her," he said quietly. "When she did not arrive at her uncle's ranch, when the storm came in, I thought she was gone. The worst 2 days of my life, searching those mountains, expecting to find her frozen body, and then to learn she had been alone with a stranger." "I understand your concerns," Nathan said, "but I swear to you, I treated her with nothing but respect. And I will continue to do so, whether you give us your blessing or not. Because Victoria is not a child, Mr. Zimmerman. She is a woman who knows what she wants. And if you forbid this, you will only push her away." Another long silence. Then Zimmerman stood and extended his hand. "I am not saying I am happy about this, but I can see that you are sincere, and I know my daughter. She has made up her mind. So yes, you have my permission to court her properly. But Morrison, if you hurt her, if you make her regret this choice, you will answer to me. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, sir," Nathan said, shaking the offered hand. The next months were a whirlwind. With Zimmerman's grudging approval, Nathan and Victoria could court openly. They attended church together, walked through town arm in arm, spent evenings in the Zimmerman parlor talking about their future. The town watched their romance with interest, and gradually even the skeptics came around. Nathan proved himself to be hardworking and devoted, and Victoria glowed with a happiness that was impossible to miss. By autumn, Nathan had built a small house on the land he had purchased, a modest but solid structure with room to grow. It sat on a hillside with a view of the mountains, not as remote as his old cabin, but still far enough from town to feel like their own space. Victoria helped him plan the interior, choosing paint colors and curtain fabrics, making it a home rather than just a shelter. In November, almost exactly 1 year after he had found her in the snow, Nathan asked Victoria to marry him. They were sitting on the porch of their almost finished house, watching the sun set over the mountains. He did not have a ring yet, but he had words. "Victoria," he said, taking her hand, "this year with you has been the best of my life. You have changed everything for me, made me want things I never thought I could have. I love you. I want to build a life with you, right here in this house. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Victoria's face as she nodded. "Yes, yes, of course yes. I have been waiting for you to ask since the day you found me in the snow." They were married in late December, in the small church in Wheatland, with what seemed like the whole town in attendance. Victoria wore a dress of ivory silk that her father had ordered specially from Denver, and Nathan wore a new suit that felt strange but worth it for the look on Victoria's face when she saw him. Richard Zimmerman walked his daughter down the aisle with tears in his eyes, and when he placed her hand in Nathan's, he whispered, "Take care of her. Always," Nathan promised. The reception was held at the town hall, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the night. Nathan, who had always been more comfortable with horses than people, found himself laughing and celebrating with a community that had accepted him. But the best moment came when he and Victoria finally left, riding together toward their new home under a sky full of stars. That first night in their house, lying together as husband and wife, Nathan held Victoria close and thought about how much had changed. A year ago, he had been alone, convinced he preferred solitude. Now he could not imagine life without this woman beside him. "What are you thinking?" Victoria asked, her head on his chest. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest man alive," Nathan said honestly. "I am thinking that finding you in that snow was the best thing that ever happened to me." Victoria tilted her head up to kiss him. "I think about that night often, how you kept telling me to stay awake, to talk to you, how you would not let me give up." "I could not let you go," Nathan said. "Even then, I think some part of me knew." "Knew what?" "That you were mine to save, mine to keep, mine to love." Victoria smiled against his skin. "Yours," she agreed. "Always yours." The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. Nathan continued working with the rancher, eventually becoming foreman. Victoria managed their home and took in sewing work, supplementing their income while doing something she enjoyed. The house grew as they added rooms, as their life expanded. Their first child came in the fall of 1883, a boy they named James after Nathan's father. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's determination, and Nathan felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. Victoria proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving, but with a strength that ensured their son would grow up knowing he was capable of anything. 2 years later, they had a daughter, Emma, who was quieter than her brother, but just as fierce underneath. She would sit for hours watching the mountains, and Nathan recognized in her the same need for space and silence that had driven him to the frontier. Richard Zimmerman, who had been so skeptical of Nathan at first, became a devoted grandfather. He visited often, bringing gifts and stories, teaching his grandchildren about business and books. He and Nathan developed a mutual respect, if not quite warmth, both united in their love for Victoria and the family she had built. Life settled into a rhythm of seasons and celebrations, of hard work and small joys. Nathan still sometimes took trips into the mountains, needing that connection to the wild places. But he always came back to Victoria, to the home they had made together, to the life they were building day by day. It was on a winter evening, nearly 10 years after they had married, that Victoria brought up the anniversary. They were sitting by the fire, the children asleep upstairs, the house quiet around them. "Do you remember what day it is?" she asked. Nathan thought about it. "Tuesday," she laughed. "Yes, but what else?" "It is the 10th anniversary of the blizzard. 10 years since you found me in the snow." Nathan pulled her closer. "How could I forget? That was the night that changed everything. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not found me? Or if you had been later?" "I try not to," Nathan admitted. "The thought of losing you, of never having this life, it is too much to bear." "I think about it sometimes," Victoria said softly. "How close I came to dying. How different everything would be. I think about how you kept telling me to stay awake, to talk to you. How you would not give up on me." "I will never give up on you," Nathan said. "Not then, not now, not ever." Victoria turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I love you, Nathan Morrison. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "The feeling is entirely mutual, Mrs. Morrison." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn. Outside, snow had started to fall, gentle flakes drifting past the windows. But inside, there was warmth and love and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived together. Years continued to pass, marked by the growth of their children and the steady accumulation of memories. James grew into a young man with a passion for horses, eventually starting his own business breaking and training mounts for the ranchers around Wheatland. Emma developed her mother's love of books and her father's connection to nature, becoming a teacher who would take her students on long walks to learn about the land. Nathan and Victoria watched their children flourish with pride. Their home became a gathering place for family and friends, known for Victoria's cooking and Nathan's stories. He would tell tales of the old days, of trapping in the mountains, of finding his wife half frozen in a snowbank. The story never got old, and Victoria would always add her own perspective. The pieces of memory she had from that night, the sound of his voice pulling her back from the edge of darkness. Richard Zimmerman passed away in 1895, having lived long enough to see his grandchildren grown and to know that his daughter was happy. He died peacefully in his sleep, and at his funeral, Nathan was surprised to find himself genuinely grieving. The man who had once distrusted him so deeply had become family in the truest sense. In his will, Zimmerman left the mercantile to Victoria. She had not expected it, and for a time she was uncertain about taking it on. But with Nathan's encouragement and James's offer to help manage it, she accepted. The store thrived under her leadership, and she found satisfaction in building something that honored her father's legacy while making it her own. When their 20th wedding anniversary arrived, Nathan planned something special. He took Victoria back to his old cabin, which still stood in the mountains though he had not used it in years. They rode up on a clear winter day, not unlike the one when he had found her, though this time they were together, warm and prepared. The cabin was dusty and cold, but Nathan built up the fire quickly. Victoria walked around the small space, touching things, remembering. "It seemed bigger then," she said. "You were half frozen and terrified," Nathan pointed out. "Everything probably seemed different. Do you remember what you kept saying to me?" "Stay awake. Talk to me," Nathan recited. "I must have said it 100 times that night." "It worked," Victoria said, moving into his arms. "You kept me alive. You brought me back." "We saved each other," Nathan corrected. "You brought life back into mine, made me want more than solitude." They spent the night in the cabin, reliving memories and creating new ones. And the next morning, as they rode back toward Wheatland and their life together, Nathan felt complete in a way he had never imagined possible. The years continued their steady march. Nathan's hair went gray, then white. Victoria's face developed lines around her eyes from years of smiling. Their bodies aged, but their love remained constant. A steady flame that had been lit on a desperate winter night and had never gone out. They became grandparents when James married a rancher's daughter and had 3 children in quick succession. Emma married later to a quiet man who taught school in Laramie, and they had twins who visited every summer. The house Nathan had built expanded again to accommodate family gatherings, and the sound of children's laughter filled spaces that had once held only silence. On quiet evenings, when it was just the two of them, Nathan and Victoria would sit on their porch and watch the mountains. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they sat in comfortable silence. But always, Nathan would reach for Victoria's hand, and she would take it, their fingers intertwining with the ease of decades. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked one such evening. They were both in their 60s now, their children grown, their grandchildren thriving. "Incredibly," Victoria said without hesitation. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible," Nathan admitted. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life, that you are my wife, that we built all of this together. It started with you refusing to let me die," Victoria said. "With you keeping me awake, making me talk, sharing your warmth. That is what love is, Nathan. It is refusing to let the other person give up. It is sharing your warmth when they are cold. It is doing whatever it takes to keep them alive and with you." Nathan pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. Then I have been loving you since the moment I found you in that snow. And I have been loving you since I opened my eyes and saw you looking at me like I was something precious worth saving. They sat together as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The air was cool but not cold, perfect for sitting outside and watching the day end. In the distance, they could see Wheatland, the town that had become home, the community that had accepted them and watched their family grow. "Do you have any regrets?" Victoria asked. Nathan considered this. "Only one. I regret every moment before I met you. Every year I wasted thinking I preferred being alone. But everything after finding you? No regrets at all. Not even when the children were small and never slept, and money was tight, and we wondered if we would make it. Not even then," Nathan confirmed. "Those hard times just made the good times sweeter, and we always had each other. That was enough." Victoria smiled, that same bright smile that had first captured his heart in his cabin all those years ago. "It was always enough," she agreed. "You were always enough." They grew old together, as people do when they are lucky enough to love and be loved in return. Nathan's body, strong from years of hard work, began to slow. Victoria's hands, so nimble with a needle, developed arthritis. But they adapted, helping each other with tasks that became harder, finding new ways to do old things. The cabin Nathan had built expanded one final time when James suggested they add a room on the ground floor so Nathan and Victoria would not have to manage stairs. It was a good addition, making their lives easier while keeping them in the home they loved. Their grandchildren grew up hearing stories of how Grandpa Nathan found Grandma Victoria in the snow, how he saved her life and they fell in love. The youngest ones would ask Nathan to tell it again and again, never tiring of the tale. And Nathan never tired of telling it, because it was his favorite story, the story of how he found the other half of his soul on a frozen mountainside. When Nathan was 72, he fell ill with pneumonia. It was Victoria who sat by his bedside, who held his hand and told him stories, who refused to let him give up. "Stay awake," she would say, tears streaming down her face. "Talk to me. Tell me about the mountains. Tell me about the first time you knew you loved me. Just stay awake." And Nathan fought, the way he had fought to keep Victoria alive all those years ago. He fought because she asked him to, because their story was not finished, because he could not bear to leave her. And he won. The fever broke, his breathing eased, and he recovered, though the illness left him weaker than before. "You saved me," he told Victoria when he was well enough to speak properly. "Fair is fair," she replied with a smile. "You saved me first." They had 5 more good years together. Years of watching their family continue to grow, of celebrating marriages and births, of sitting together on their porch and counting their blessings. They traveled a bit, visiting Emma in Laramie, taking a trip to Denver that Victoria had always wanted. They lived fully, squeezing joy from every day they had together. Nathan passed peacefully in his sleep one winter night, with Victoria beside him as she had been for nearly 50 years. He was 77 years old. Victoria woke to find him gone, his hands still in hers, his face peaceful. She sat with him for a long time, talking to him one last time, thanking him for their life together, for finding her in that snow, for never giving up on her. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Wyoming. Nathan had lived a good life, had touched many people with his quiet strength and his obvious devotion to his family. Victoria stood at the graveside, flanked by her children and grandchildren, and spoke about the man she had loved. "He saved my life," she said simply. "And then he made that life worth living. He showed me what love looks like, how it acts. Love is refusing to let someone give up. Love is sharing your warmth when they are cold. Love is choosing each other, every day, through hard times and good. Nathan Morrison loved me like that, and I loved him. I will always love him." Victoria lived another 8 years, remaining sharp and active despite her grief. She spent time with her family, continued to manage the store with James, and wrote down the story of her life with Nathan so her grandchildren and great-grandchildren would always know how their family began. On winter evenings, she would sometimes take out the old blankets from Nathan's cabin, the ones he had wrapped her in that desperate night. She would sit by the fire, wrapped in those blankets, and remember his voice telling her to stay awake, to talk to him. Remember the warmth of his body keeping her alive. Remember the moment she opened her eyes and knew, somehow, that this man would change her life forever. When Victoria passed away at 85, it was winter, and snow was falling gently outside her window. Her children and grandchildren were with her, and her last words were a smile and a whisper, "Nathan, I am coming." They buried her beside him, under a cottonwood tree on the hillside overlooking their home. The headstones were simple, marking the dates of their births and deaths, but also carrying words Victoria had chosen years before. Nathan Morrison's stone read, "He saved her life and loved her all of his." Victoria's read, "She stayed awake and talked to him forever." Their story became legend in Wheatland, the tale of the cowboy who found a woman dying in the snow and loved her for the rest of his life. It was told at family gatherings, shared with new generations, remembered as an example of how love can begin in the most desperate circumstances and grow into something eternal. The house Nathan built still stands, owned now by one of their great-grandchildren. The mountains he loved still rise above Wheatland. The town has grown and changed, but something of Nathan and Victoria remains, in the stories people tell, in the family they created, in the proof that love, real love, can survive anything. Because love is not just passion or romance, though it can be both. Love is refusing to let someone give up. Love is sharing your warmth when they are cold. Love is doing whatever it takes to keep them alive and with you. Love is choosing each other, every day, through blizzards and sunshine, through hard times and good. Nathan and Victoria understood that. They lived it. And their love story, which began with desperate words in a snowstorm, became a testament to the power of commitment, devotion, and choosing each other, again and again, until the very end. Their descendants carry that legacy forward, generation after generation, always remembering where it started. With a cowboy who found a woman unconscious in the snow, warmed her all night, and said, "Stay awake, talk to me." And she did. She stayed. And they built a beautiful life together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time. It is a simple story, really. But the best love stories often are. They are not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. They are about showing up, about refusing to give up, about sharing warmth on cold nights. They are about seeing someone at their most vulnerable and choosing to protect them, to care for them, to love them. That is what Nathan did for Victoria on that winter night in 1882. And that is what they did for each other every day after, until death finally parted them. Even then, their love lived on, in their children and grandchildren, in the stories that were told, in the life they had built together in the shadow of the Wyoming mountains. And when winter comes to Wheatland now, when snow falls thick and the wind howls through the peaks, some people say you can still feel their presence. The love that refused to let her die. The trust that brought them together. The commitment that kept them together through 50 years of life. It is a reminder that real love exists. That it is worth fighting for, worth choosing, worth building a life around. That sometimes the best things come from the hardest moments. That being saved is not weakness, and saving someone is not burden, but rather the beginning of something beautiful. Nathan and Victoria Morrison lived that truth. And their story, which began with desperate survival and grew into enduring love, remains a testament to what is possible when two people choose each other and never look back. The snow still falls in the Wyoming mountains. The cabin where Nathan saved Victoria's life still stands, weathered but strong. And somewhere in the quiet moments of winter nights, when the wind whispers through the trees and the stars shine bright above, the spirit of their love remains, warming the cold world with the memory of a cowboy who found his wife in the snow and loved her forever.